Okay, today I'm going to show you how to take apart one of these Kero 241A paraffin heaters, and other paraffin heaters will be very similar. Now, before you do anything, take the batteries off the back. So before you do anything, you take the batteries off the back, right? Because this electric ignition produces quite a lot of volts and it's going to give you a shock. So, and then the next thing, you should have a knob that goes up and down. You push down to start the thing and a button that stops it. Pull this off the slider. Just pull that knob off the slider. Put it somewhere safe. This also has a screw at the bottom. Undo that Phillips screw. Either put it somewhere safe, or if it stays in there, just be careful it doesn't fall out. Sometimes mine stays in there. Just be careful. Now this won't yet be removable, but what you can do is now you can pull it away from the metal spike that plastic knob was going on, and you can just leave it like that, and then it's not going to stop the thing from lifting up. Okay. Now next thing, take off the tank. Okay. And the next thing is this gate has to be opened. That hooks in under there, and then at the bottom it's got a hole that's kind of wider that end than it is this end, and it's kind of spring loaded towards the narrow end, so it kind of holds itself in. Push it back and then you can go up with it, then you can pull that out, and then the top can come out. Now you can open the gate, and now we take out the element. Okay, that's all one piece. I don't know if it can be taken apart at all. Doesn't look like it can, but I haven't got my glasses on. But so we take that off. That's off. Put it somewhere safe. Okay, shut the gate so it's not swinging around. So remember, put the top in first, then come up, then go down into the wide part of the hole at the bottom and let it spring into the narrow part of the hole. Make sure that's all firm. Now you've got a Phillips screw, and this is quite common on these. The Phillips screws in the sides, one at each end, so 4 Phillips screws in total, and then wiggling this as you go, lift this all off. Away, take it away. Here's the button and lever assembly. There's the tiny screw. See, it's black. It's hard to see if you drop it. It's japanned. So that screw there, but it does sort of go in and stay in if you're careful. Okay, so that button assembly, put that again somewhere safe. So again, make sure those batteries are off, because if those batteries aren't off, you could give yourself a shock with what you're about to do. Now, I'll explain to you. When this tank goes on, it goes into this sort of plastic sleeve that just sits on the tank opening, and as it goes in, it actually presses. Have I got it the right way around? I think I've got it the wrong way around. It actually presses a lever just here down, and that lever enables you to switch this thing on. So when the lever's down and you press your lever here, that switches it on, and then you've got a button that switches it off. So that's your lever and button assembly there and there. But if this lever is up, because the tank's not in, it won't stay on. If I press that down, imagine the tank's in there, switch it on, and then the tank comes out, immediately switches itself off. So this is safety, so you can't pull the tank out while it's going, or start it with the tank out. The tank must be in. So that's that. And so don't change any of these items. Don't mess with them. Do not do. Because there is also, just here, an inverted truncated cone of metal. So it's in fine balance, and it sits in this little plastic indentation here, this circular indentation. It has a chain hanging down from it, a bit like a plug chain for your sink. And this, when you switch the whole thing on, the chain gets pulled slightly tight. It's tight enough to make this thing sit up. Just enough to make it sit up, but not enough to hold it fully in place. And so if this thing gets tipped over, that weight falls over, and that also instantly switches the thing off. And because it's so finely balanced, mine went wrong. I've removed it. Don't remove it, you shouldn't remove it, okay? Make sure you're always attending the fire if you do have to do something like that. Now there's 3 nuts on mine that go on here all around this. There's 3 nuts, and we just need to use a number, can't remember which socket spanner it is, I think it's a number 7 or something like that. And I also needed to use the extension bar, I think that's the 7 there, my eyes aren't good enough. I needed to use the extension bar to remove them. Yeah, because they're so close to this that you can't actually get the spanner on the nut. So you put the extension bar on if you've got a socket set like this, and then you can get onto that, see? I loosen it off. Personally, the way I like to do it, I just loosen them all off so they're all not so tight, and then I grab this attachment if you've got one in your set, and then I just undo them really quick like that. There's no washers on mine. Yours is most likely similar, very likely similar to mine. So now we remove those 3 nuts, put them safe with all the other bits and pieces that you've taken off so far. Okay, lots of bits and pieces getting taken off here. I'm going to reassemble it for you as well, completely. Then this lifts off. Now you watch this wire here. Be very careful of that. And place this just gently here. Have a visual check of these other wires. Make sure there's nothing loose there that it shouldn't be. Now we're going to show you how the wick works. There is still some kind of watery stuff in my heater. I'm just going to see if I've got some tissues down here. So we've got the filler here is actually higher than the main reservoir. So just because you've got everything out of the filler here, don't imagine that this is any kind of sump. It isn't. It's just where the stuff goes in, but there is a sort of sump to it. It does, some will always sit in there. Just give it all a good nice clean. I've done this already, so it's kind of cleanish. And give this a clean as well. I would recommend using just the pure water baby wipes, pure ones. So I use a suction syringe pump to get the liquid out of this in the first place. In the first instance, that's what I did, and then it was in there because that's lower. But then you just tip the thing up, and it goes into this little reservoir. I suppose that's how it's designed to work. So you can tip it up, and it'll flow into this little reservoir, which does have a slight sink to it, and then it's all in there, and then you can get it out of there with your cloth or whatever, whereas it's harder to get it out of here. So I guess that's the system. You tip it up, fill it into there, soak it up with cloths, or suck it out with a syringe as I did, and then finish soaking up with cloths. And that's emptied all of that out. So let's put that back in because we don't want to forget. Do not forget to put that back in, very important, because that's where your tank connects. And that little spike on there is what opens the valve on the tank. So without this plastic in there, your thing won't work, and you'll wonder why it's not working. So make sure that's back in. Don't leave it out. Now I'm going to show you how the actual wick razor part works. What have I done with the wick? Oh, it's right here. And you can buy these new wicks. They're not cheap, about 20 quid or something. They're fiberglass at the top and a sort of synthetic stuff up to about there. There's a line on it here. This line should not, you should just about be visible through this. This is what holds the wick, this hoop. So you will have taken the wick off, and I will show you how to do that, but I'm going to put mine back on right now, of course. This has an arrow on it, an up arrow on one side, so make sure it's the right way up, because that doesn't look very different. The wick, the new wick goes inside the same way that you'll get the old one out. Basically you've got these punched triangles of metal that spike into it and hold it in place. So we get it up so that that line, if it's a brand new wick, put that line dead on there. If it's a bit worn out and not lighting very well, you can raise it a tiny bit, but you have to be very careful. You're not really supposed to go above that line, but I do, because I like to live dangerously. So yeah, I give myself like maximum 2mm extra there if the wick's a bit tired. And we're just pressing it onto those triangles all the way around. That's pretty good. So now it's in there. And as I say, to removal would be the same. You just squeeze it, get it off these triangular things. Now it's going to go down. In fact, it's easier to remove than to put on. So it's going to go on like this, and then we want these fins, squish them, get them flat. There we are. Flat. I'm not sure if that's got to have give on it, that thread, or not. Can't remember. I don't know. It's probably supposed to be intact, that, but I'm not going to worry about it. So that goes down. It's quite snug. It slides down. As it hits the bottom, those fins will start to expand out again. Now, probably before you do that, you should press this and raise these arms. And the way that these arms work, you probably can't see from there very well, but they have a slot. This one has a slot going in that way, but this arm, which also comes out the same way, has a slot that kind of comes from behind and goes in that way. And the reason is so that you can screw this assembly with its two lugs. So you can turn it and lock it into both slots at once. So it will go that way and this lug will go down that slot. But as that happens, this one will come from behind and hook this slot. This one's kind of hooky. So get this over and try and get the whole thing to go, I'm still holding these up, try and get the whole thing down and under those, there we are. So all those, the kind of bulb of the wick goes under, and then we want to line this up so that this lug is lined up with that slot ready to go in, and this lug is lined up with that slot ready to go in. Okay, so can you see that now? That's lined up with that slot and it's going to go in along there. I'm holding this down for all my life at the moment, and this one will go in through that slot. Now it's quite hard to line them both up at the same time, if not impossible. You have to sort of wiggle and keep the pressure and maybe manually lift some of these. In fact, it might not be a bad idea to get your plastic knob, put it back on at this point, because it's just, this is quite sharp on your fingers. There we are, that's much easier to do. So get this thing raised up and returning at the same time, and we let it go down as it turns. There we are, it's in. It's quite a wiggle. You'll see how and why it is a wiggle. So that's on now. There it is. And now we check. It's getting stuck. So that's not right. There's something going wrong there. So I'm going to refit it. Shouldn't stick. Let's try it. Let's try the lugs the other way. Fix it. Yeah, I think this stitching is supposed to be connected, so I'm going to connect that quickly. Okay, so we've stitched it together a bit. I'm hoping that's what the problem was, because it could also be that it's less slippery and pliable once it's, the right way. That's the right way up. Once it's dried out, because it is dried out at the moment. I may need to fill it up before it starts really working. Okay, I think that was slightly bent actually, that lug. It's still not quite slipping down, but I'm going to assume... Oh, that's better. Yeah. So I'm going to assume that it will get more lubricated once we get it full of paraffin. And when you do fill it with paraffin, you've got to leave it to soak in thoroughly for quite some time. Look in your instructions. I think it's 3 hours or something, I think they say. So that's all back on now. Okay, those lugs are all where they should be. We're going to put this back over. I think that stitching did help. And now we take a number 7 spanner number 7 socket. You could use a ring spanner. If it's hard to get with the sockets, use a ring spanner. In a pinch you can use an adjustable. They're not ideal, but it'll work. This isn't a, it's not a car engine or something. You're not going to kill it because you've used a adjustable spanner on it. So putting them back on, of course, much easier. Like I say, I reckon as tight as you can do it with your hand on a screwdriver. Can be deceptive. You think it's really tight when you do it with your hand, and then you put the spanner on it and you realise it wasn't actually that tight at all. So let's just get the ratchet spanner and just have a look. Yeah, there's a bit more there. Quite a bit more. See? Almost half a turn more. So just finish them off with the spanner, I say. Just needed that bit more. Right, so that's all on. All our wires are all intact. Everything's still working. Wick comes up nice and high. Right, so that's that. Now we've got our screws that go on the side here, of which, strangely enough, I've only got 3. So the other one is running around. And again, while it's open, because you're not going to be doing this often, give this a good thorough clean. This channel's quite hard to clean when the cover's on. Just get all the dust and rubbish out of this thing. It'll just make it easier next time when you clean it, when you do something to it. Watch these wires, be very careful on the ignition circuit. You can light these things with one of these. I know they tell you not to, but you can. Oh, I need to zoom out, don't I? So yeah, sorry, I wasn't zoomed out. So yeah, we have found our screws. Hopefully you could see enough of what was going on there. We've done up the nuts. Yeah, I did them up using the screwdriver attachment till they were hand tight, and then we finished them off with a spanner, which took nearly a half turn extra. So I was just saying that hand tight's not always as much as you think it is. Still not putting the batteries in just yet. They go in here. Just getting all the rest of the fluff out. Make sure those connections are good. So now the next thing we need to do is replace the main cowling of the whole thing, which we will have given a clean as well, of course. So let's take that button, let's take that knob off once more. Put this on. Mine rather curiously just sort of sits on the battery compartment there. It's got like a flap of metal in there that you feel like it should go into the battery compartment. It doesn't, it just rests on it. That flap is just there so that it's not a sharp edge of metal. It folds over. And then we want to make sure that the fire comes outside. Well, we've got little tabs there. Make sure it's outside of those. Now, before we put this back on, very important not to forget this, which I actually just did. This thing needs to go back in place because it kind of goes in front and behind like that. Do you see? And just be very mindful of the kind of loose wiring-y things that you've got going on at the same time. So that's a little bit tricky. You have to kind of get it over that thing. What have I done with the knob for it? So another tip, always video yourself, because you can go back and find things that you've put down, but also you can you can work out how you put it together and how you got it apart. It never feels like you've fully got it down, but you have. It just never quite feels like it. That screw we will do after, because first we just want to get these screws on and make sure these going over the tabs and not under them. Yep, these front ones, they have a tab. There it is. Get that nicely lined up, that front one. It kind of hovers. It doesn't really sit in the rut, this fire, and that's why it's hard to locate the screws. Okay, so that's the first front one on. I'm not going to tighten it fully. We might need a bit of wiggle allowance for the others. Lining it up with a hole where I can see it. And that's the front, which is the most important part. Back ones on mine anyway might be different on your heater, but the front ones are the harder ones. They go onto a tiny tab, whereas I think these back ones go onto a larger piece of metal, and so it's just more, it more locates itself automatically. I think the front ones are almost hovering the front of the fire, but the back is kind of almost sitting down, and you almost have to push it down more to line up the hole. So that might be an intentional tension that they've put into the structure to just sort of make sure that those, because a screw under tension is always tighter if it's being pushed from the side than one that's not. So I suspect that's an intentional thing that they've done there. So now we can tighten them. Don't over tighten these. Just make sure they're nipped in. And then we've got this screw just to hold the button in. Obviously make sure that button is fully correctly located before you do those tightens on the sides. Otherwise you're going to have to undo the whole lot, start again. Put the element back on. Okay, so going back on, we hook the top in first, then the bottom. So that should not stay on yet because we haven't got the tank on, so we put the tank in. When the tank goes back in, you should feel that soft landing as it lands on the spike, the plastic spike for the valve. And now it should be possible. There we are, that stays up. Now the wick is staying up and going back off. Staying up, going back off. It's a little bit sticky. I think that's because it's not wet. I think that's just because it's dry. Close up your socket spanners before you drop them everywhere. I hate when that happens. I found the knob. So it's going to go on. There we are. Now then, final thing, fill this up to the usual level, which is halfway up that visual thing if you've got one like this, and then leave it in there for 3 hours before lighting it. I think it's 3 hours before you attempt to light it. And that is how you service the Kero 241A.